John Kuzmich here in Denver, Colorado, working with a noted author of a conducting book entitled Baton Basics, Communicating Music Through Gestures. Would you welcome Diane Wittry?
Hi there, it's great to be here.
And we're going to have fun because this is a subject that every music teacher needs to be in tune with, because their conducting needs to be flexible, needs to be creative, rather than regimented as a military conductor. So Diane is the conductor of the Allentown Symphony in Allentown, Pennsylvania, frequent guest conductor throughout the world, artistic director, International Cultural Exchange Program with the Sarajevo Philharmonic, and the author of Beyond the Baton, which is a book on artistic leadership which has become the standard for conductors across the United States. So, without any more conversation here, let's find out exactly what's in this book.
So I wrote this book because I felt that in looking through all the conducting books that were available, that we needed a method of teaching that was a little bit more intuitive and that dealt with gestures as a larger vocabulary for communicating sound and attacks. And so often we just start with the basic beat patterns, and we don't really talk about how the gesture affects the quality of the sound. So this was something I was very interested in exploring through this book.
And I can understand why you wrote the book. Who would benefit from this book, Diane?
Well, I think anyone that's studying conducting. I wrote the book to be very generic in that it can be used for orchestral conducting classes, it can be used for band conducting classes, even a jazz band or chorus class. Or it's also very, very useful for someone that's been studying and out there conducting for years, but wants to really reevaluate how they communicate sound through their gestures to the ensemble. And so I think it really can be used by a beginner or an advanced student of conducting.
Well, I think you've got my interest. Now I'd like to see exactly what's in each chapter. So we're going to go through the slides, and I am going to give you the microphone to educate us. And I know we have some videos to demonstrate what the book is about. So here we are in Chapter 1, Diane.
So Chapter 1 really deals basically with the body and with your posture, because it is so important for that to be aligned and relaxed in order for you to really create great music making. And so few books really talk about how do you stand and how do you release tension so that you're not getting in the way of the music. And so the first chapter goes through exercises for your feet, for your legs, for your torso, for your arms, in how to naturally release all the tension that you may be carrying in those parts of your body.
Well, speaking of arms, let's go. This is the, there are 4 things that you have described here. Can you describe each one in some simplistic way?
Arms, this talks about some of the exercises for the arms, and this deals with how do you find the right placement of your arms as a conductor. How much elbow space do you need? You know, some people squeeze their sides, other people have too much space. There's some exercises that deal with pushing and pulling sort of the energy between your hands, and also an exercise of wiping and polishing the table. And the great thing about the book is that the book actually utilizes videos so that each of these can then be seen in a video so that you can see someone else doing these exercises before you try to do them yourself.
Well, I was very much taken when I went to the website of the publisher, Oxford University Press, and it was slick. You could go through these videos, you could go through the chapters, and it was really interesting. Now, we've got...
It is important that you get the proper position for your arms as a conductor. And I advocate a circular placement where if you were to make a circle in front of your body by touching your fingers, and then you would gradually move it away from your body and then turn your hands over. If you were to see it from the side, it might look like this. Make the circle by touching your fingers, then gradually shift it out in front of your body about 8 to 10 inches and turn your hands over. The space between your elbows and your body is also important. You want to make sure not to hug the sides, but to bring your elbows out and create a rounded space with your fingers touching, and then turn your hands over. The accordion push-pull exercise is a good way for feeling the intensity of energy between your hands in the proper conducting position. You can also practice wiping the table, where you pretend that you have a table in front of you and you want to actually run your fingers across the top of that table, feeling the connection with it. Make sure you practice this with both hands.
Okay. Now, obviously, once you've become oriented, what do you do next?
Well, another different thing about this book is that it really talks a lot about how do you communicate weight, resistance, speed, and energy. So the starting point is not so much beat patterns, but how do you communicate sound through understanding different weights and resistance speeds that you have to communicate through your gestures. And the trick is, how do you do this in a way that's not totally confusing for the student? And so what I do is I utilize props. And the props really help us to understand the weight.
Well, in looking at this, we have several unique ways of doing this, and I'm going to need some instruction here. And speaking of props, oh my gosh, can you give us an idea of how to use them?
These are just a few examples of things that you might want to utilize. When you pick up an object, like picking up a Coke can, you intersect and you grab the Coke can, and then you pick it up and you feel that weight. The same thing is true of a conducting gesture. On my prep, I need to actually intersect and pick up that weight in order to be able to communicate to the players the quality of the sound that I want them to play. So it's not just giving them the entrance, it's what weight and quality of sound. So in this, we have a variety of different size objects, different weights of objects. And then even like in the corner, you have the C-sponge. That would be for pressing and feeling that there's an intersection, but there's also a give. There's a hammer there for, that basic ictus beat where you have a weight and you're striking something, but there's a rebound. Picking up a glass of wine or apple juice or something gives you, once again, a feeling of intersection and the communication of weight.
Well, that certainly gets my attention, seeing all these props.
And so the other thing unique about this book is that we really talk about dividing your hand into, full arm motion, forearm, wrist, and finger motion. And then the whole chapter 2 is a series of exercises that really break down the gestures and help you to train the muscles of your fingers, your wrist, your forearm, your full arm, so that you're connecting to sound and to weights and to objects, to intensity and speed, but you're learning how to separate your muscles and training your muscles so they know what to do as you conduct.
Well, you definitely have my attention.
So with these, we have different types of motion, downwards motion, upwards motion, sideways. Those we talk about a lot, but many people forget that we also have the ability to move outward, the ability to move inward, and the ability to do different types of motions like circles, arcs, and free motion. And these are all broken down through exercises in chapter 2.
Excellent. I find this very enlightening.
As a conductor, you're going to want to spend some time practicing your downward gesture. A good starting point is motion downward with a contact point and then a release. So let's start with our fingers and pretend like you're typing on a computer. The finger strikes the key and then releases. Or you could be tapping someone on the shoulder with your wrist and your hand motion. Or you could be bouncing a basketball with your forearm motion, or bouncing the basketball very, very high using your full arm motion. And now for a motion downwards where you have a contact point, but then the gesture stops. So think of turning off a light switch with your fingers. Turn the light switch off. Then you're going to play and hold a note on a piano. So wrist gesture. And now pretend like you're placing your hand on a baby's head. That's your forearm in your hand. And now drawing a line downward on a chalkboard is your full arm. And you can practice this gesture. We also have motion downward with resistance, a contact point, and then a stop. So with your finger, imagine that you're sliding a dimmer switch down. Or with your hand, closing the box of a Jack-in-the-Box toy, feeling the spring. Or with your forearm, you can be pulling down on a window shade, feeling the resistance. Or with your full arm, imagine that you're painting a fence and feel the weight and resistance of the brush against the fence.
Well, I like the way you divide up the gestures. To me, that's pretty clear on what to do.
Well, and one of the important things is that you practice and train the muscles before you then get into the music. So we begin first with some muscle memory and noticing when there's a rebound and when we just stop and when there's energy towards and energy away. But in chapter 3, we then begin to talk about what I call the table of sound. This is where the placement of the beat happens. This is where we connect with the sound. We talk about holding the baton, and in the book we present not just one way of holding the baton, but there's actually 5 different ways of holding the baton that are used for different types of music, for cues, for strong beats, for soft beats, so that you understand that there's not just one way to hold the baton. Then we talk about the beat patterns, and then what's unique about this book is we go into different conducting styles, and particularly we talk about the different styles of the Germanic style, which was really defined by Max Rudolph and brought to the United States and adopted. And this is, I think, the method that's more commonly taught at the universities now in the United States. We also talk about the Russian style, which is Ilya Musin. And then we also talk about the Saito method of conducting.
Well, I was almost mesmerized when I was able to see all the different patterns that they utilized. And to me, this was, well, I call this cutting edge photography,
right.
Because
so in the book you'll see there are diagrams that put you in the ballpark of the different types of styles. Now these diagrams will look pretty familiar to you if you've studied conducting before. They are sort of the standard Max Rudolph conducting, the type of beat pattern that utilizes an ictus, the type of beat pattern where the impact of the beat is usually towards the ends of the stroke. And this is a common method of teaching conducting. Where the book gets a little bit further afield is when we talk about the Musin technique, which is the Russian technique. And this technique is based more upon circles, and they talk about picking up weight, and therefore all that diagram of all those different types of weights, whether you're picking up a Coke can weight, whether you're picking up a ping pong ball weight, whether you're picking up a liter of soda weight, what weight are you picking up, and then how are you carrying that weight through to the next beat. So in the Russian technique, you never, once you pick up the weight of the sound, you never let it go, which is very different than the Max Rudolph, where perhaps you're doing a hammer stroke with an ictus type beat, and every stroke you're releasing that weight. And so you would utilize these for different types of music. And then we have the Japanese technique, and the Japanese, the Saito technique, is based upon a pendulum swing. And so you have actually two different types. You have the pendulum swing, and then you also have this sort of hatchet stroke. And you can see in these diagrams, the pendulum string, the beat happens in the middle of the stroke. And with the hatchet, it happens at the end of the stroke, but there's a speed difference where maybe it's a faster at the beginning and then it stops at the bottom. And so I believe that students and people who work as conductors need to understand the different types of conducting technique that they can utilize as they make music.
Well, bravo in trying to put all these gestures or these different styles together, because they don't all happen at the same time, but they are different ways of accentuating what the conductor wants from the orchestra or the band. So bravo on that. I'm amazed that you can get such an organization out of so many different styles.
Well, and then we go on with the book and we talk about now, we've talked about how to train your hand, how to be aware of your fingers, your wrist, your forearm, your full arm. Now we want to start applying these gestures to these different types of beat patterns and these different styles of conducting. So we talk a lot about how to give a prep beat, how to get the orchestra going, talk a lot about instrument characteristics. What type of gesture is going to be most effective with different types of instruments? Obviously, a string player can create a different type of sound with the bow than an oboe player with the reed, and they need different types of gestures to enable them to do their best work. And then, of course, the left hand independence is something that always needs to be worked on and discussed. And so there's a whole section on exercises of how to develop your left hand independence.
Well, these are all what I call essential, but when you go on with your next chapter or you apply more things to all of this yet.
Yes, there's a lot in chapter 4, and so as you're applying and combining these gestures, we talk in depth about how to give cues, what types of cues, samples, and with all of these, I'm giving samples of things that people already know how to do. That's what makes this book so easy to teach, is that you're not trying to say, lift your arm here and hold it 4 inches away from here. You're basically saying, for a cue, throw a dart. Everybody knows how to throw a dart. That's a certain type of cue that can be utilized. And so we're utilizing those types of concepts. There's a whole video on accents and syncopations. And this tells of the different types of accents and examples of how you can conduct them.
Well, I find this very realistic in teaching the tools of conducting, because you have broken it into segments and you've identified different ways to do it. So it's very interesting.
Basic accent gestures can be shown in a variety of volume levels. Here are some to practice. Piano. Imagine that you're popping a balloon with a pin on the table in front of you. It's a downward motion. Or for mezzo piano, you could be throwing a marble at the table. Or for a mezzo forte accent, experiment with holding a small hammer and striking it quickly. For a forte one, imagine that you're holding a big, heavy hammer and striking a nail. The dot accent is shown by a quick flick of the fingers or the wrist. We can flick drops of water off the tip of our baton, or we can pretend that we're touching a hot stove with our finger and reacting and pulling away. Wedge accents are heavier than a standard accent. You can show them by striking with a heavy hammer, or by hammering with a very large maul, striking downward. Then we have the dash accent. A dash is shown by pressing as you would on a wet sponge to show a piano dynamic, or perhaps pressing on a pillow for a mezzo forte dynamic.
Well, I find that very creative on getting fine-tuning there. But now, here we go with more tools of the trade.
Well, yeah, so no conducting book would be complete without covering all sorts of things like lifts and holds and rests and releases. And there's a section on conducting recitative, which is always a challenge for a conductor. But I love this section on fermatas because you can actually sort of see how the different types, some fermatas you hold and then there's a space. Other fermatas have a continuation, so you almost have to add an extra beat. So we work our way through the different types of fermatas. Also within the book, there are the universal rules of conducting different things like fermatas. So we have a video now that talks a little bit more about how to conduct fermatas.
Fermatas fall into two basic categories: fermatas that are held and continue without a pause, and fermatas that need a cutoff. A continuous fermata needs no cutoff. The note is held and continues into the next phrase without a pause. With this type of fermata, the right hand stops in the fermata note and holds it, and then you continue. There are two types of fermatas that use cutoffs. A fermata with a short silence that's up to 1 beat in length or less, and then the piece continues. When conducting this type of fermata, the cutoff gesture is the prep gesture for the next entrance. A fermata followed by a silence or rest considerably longer than 1 beat is a different type of fermata. For this, 2 separate gestures must be given, one gesture for the cutoff and the other gesture to show the prep beat for the next entrance. Sometimes you have a fermata that's underneath a cadenza. With this, your right hand will continue to show the extended hold, while the left hand is used to cue any musicians that might have a separate entrance. Other times you may have to rebeat a fermata, where you hold a beat and you have to re-give that same beat before you continue on.
Well, as many bags of tricks or tools that are necessary to be a conductor, one of the most awkward ones is what do you do to either speed up the tempo or slow it down? How do you manage this in your book?
Well, you're exactly right, because it is one of the hardest things to do. And so there's a whole chapter on tempo and volume and how to make an accelerando, how to make a ritardando. And there's systems of actually merging your beats so that you can move smoothly from a larger beat and then to a subdivided beat if you wanted to slow down, or from a subdivided beat to then the single beat if you wanted to speed up. So we have a video that talks about how to merge beats and how to create an accelerando.
When conducting an accelerando, there are times when you'll have to merge your beats. So if you want to merge from a subdivided 4 pattern into a standard 4 pattern, you're going to start and you're conducting all the subdivisions, and gradually you're going to change to a type of hatchet beat, where you stop and then you conduct the end, and then you're going to smooth it out. And then you're going to do the same thing now with the accelerando. At the end, you gradually make the beat smaller. If you want to merge 4 beats into 2 beats, you'll start with 4, then gradually shorten the crosswise beats, and go into 2. And now the same pattern with the accelerando. to merge 3 beats into 1 beat, you'll start with a 3 pattern, then make it smaller, more square, and then begin to round it, and then finally a rounded pattern. The same gesture with an accelerando.
Well, I love the way that you make the diagrams flow and illustrate what's being demonstrated, because it's never easy to get into those particular things. But you also mention in the book some ideas on how to focus the mind on how to become more centered while you conduct. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yes, and so this is a chapter that is probably not covered in most of the books out there, but I think it's very, very important. As a conductor, you create the environment for the music making by the way you stand on the podium and by the calmness in your body to create the environment that people can really make music. And so, many people when they're conducting, they're very nervous, they're very excited, they are afraid even sometimes. And so this presents a whole chapter of breathing exercises for really calming your mind, focusing your mind, connecting to energy so you can communicate that energy of the music to the larger ensemble. And I think it's very, very important that we spend some time talking about this type of chapter when we're teaching conducting.
Well, I like the concept of how to communicate emotions, and you have quite a detailed list of how to study a score. Are these all included in Chapter 7?
Yes, so Chapter 7 covers studying the music, and it talks about, how do you convey emotion and character? So often we just say, okay, as long as you're beating 4 in the right place and you're cueing the entrances, you've done your job. And to me, that's just the beginning of being a conductor. And it's really more about communicating emotions, character, color of sound, energy. And so we talk about, once again, connecting to things you already know and understand. And we utilize that as the starting point for teaching how to communicate those types of emotions. There's a whole list of score study exercises and processes, because obviously if you don't know your music, you can't communicate that to the group. And then there's a whole section also on concert and rehearsal preparation. This is particularly useful for a younger conductor who hasn't been through this process before, but what do you expect going through the rehearsal process and the actual concert? So trying to round out and make the book cover all the details you need to be a really great conductor.
And this isn't the end of Chapter 7. There's more to it.
Yes, there is. We then go on to talk about leadership, because every conductor is a great leader, or should be a great leader. And how do you become an inspiring leader? What types of characteristics do you need to cultivate? Then there's a section on do's and don'ts. What types of things should you do and what types of things really should you not do? And then the chapter ends with some career advice, which I think is always useful for anyone at any point in their career.
Well, you certainly have stimulated interest, because I would like to learn more about your book, and I know that you have all the answers for me.
Well, and the nice thing about this book is it does come with a very detailed website, which has all the instructional videos, so that every chapter, as you work your way through it, if you have any questions, you just refer to those videos. It's a great teaching tool, because many of the videos, as you saw, have diagrams in the corner that correspond with diagrams in the book. The book is written in a very easy to follow conversational manner, so it's good for conductors at any level in their career.
And I would strongly recommend them, because it's very well organized and so, well, it's a one-stop shop. You can learn everything about your book from just one website. Now, no book would be complete without endorsements here. Anything that you want to mention about any of these endorsements?
Well, I feel very fortunate that some of the leaders in the field have endorsed the book. So Alan Gilbert is the music director and conductor of the New York Philharmonic. We have Joanne Valletta, who is the conductor of the Buffalo Philharmonic and also the Virginia Symphony. We have, so basically we have orchestral conductors that are endorsing the book. We also have band conductors that are endorsing the book. Charles Peltz, who is at the New England Conservatory, has written a very nice endorsement of the book. And he's a great supporter of it and believes in what this teaching method is all about. And then we also have a choral conductor who has endorsed the book, and we're very, very happy to have him also. And he happened to actually teaches at the Thornton School of Music at USC, where I went to school. So we're very happy to have that sort of endorsement. But I wanted to make sure that the book was usable by anyone of any discipline studying conducting. And we're hoping to come out in the next year or so with a workbook to go with the book that would have actual musical exercises and examples that also are drawn from orchestral, band, and choral repertoire. So, we're going to be giving you more materials in the next year or so.
Well, I think before we go to our last slide, I think we need to reappear to the audience so they know this wasn't a recorded message, but this was a message presented in a sequence that illustrates that the book is alive and well and can stimulate. From my point of view, it's amazing how you've broken everything up into different segments, and then how many videos approximately are a part of this book?
I haven't counted recently, but I think there's probably at least 40 or so, and there's extensive diagrams within the book itself. I think there are about 70 or so diagrams. So between the videos and the diagrams, and also the fact that everything I'm talking about really is referring to something that you already know how to do. You know how to pick up a glass of water. You know how to hammer. You know how to throw a dart. You know how to wipe off a table. And so using visual imagery really makes the starting point so much simpler for someone learning how to conduct.
Now, no video would ever be complete without showing what it looks like. And how many pages approximately would be in this book? Not that we're going to count them right now, but I'm looking at...
It's under 200 or so, just about 200.
Well, all I can say is it's fascinating reading. It's organized, and between the videos, now you stimulated some interest to me because you said that there's going to be an update on your website for more training material.
Yes, we're working right now on creating musical examples. So the book has some musical examples, but it really relies upon the teacher to pick musical examples to utilize, depending on whether they're teaching more band-oriented, choral-oriented, or orchestral. But some of the feedback I've been getting is that people would really like another book, a workbook that would go with my book that would actually have some of these examples all in one place. So that's going to be the next thing that we're going to be putting out there, which will make it a lot easier to utilize this.
Well, now that you have stimulated interest in your book, how do people contact you?
Well, it's pretty easy. They would they can either contact me personally, or they can go through the Oxford website, and we do have a discount coupon available at Oxford. It's the global website, global OUP/academic. And if you type in this coupon, AAFlyG6, you get a 30% discount. And at the bottom there on the screen, you'll see that you can just type in my name, Diane Wittry, at gmail.com. If you have questions, would like more materials about the book, or if you're interested in having me come out and do a guest lecture or a guest workshop. I do a lot of conducting, teaching, and master classes. I usually teach one in Europe each year, in either Bulgaria, and then I also usually teach one in Connecticut. So if you're interested in coming and studying, that would be great also.
Well, I find this very rewarding to know that there are books like this available for educators in the field or professionals in the field or aspiring conductors, because you and I know that we need the tools And with your flexibility of your presentations that are in here, we have the beginning of a new conductor.
Agreed. And you know, the more you can study and the more you can expand what I call your vocabulary of gestures to utilize with your ensemble, the better conductor you'll be. And therefore, the better music making will happen.
Well, this book is Baton Basics, once again, by Diane Wittry. And needless to say, it is worth picking up. And you have the website, so please go and find out more about the book, because the website is in depth, and I want you to know that I've enjoyed this, and all I can say is thank you, Diane.
Thanks, John. Enjoyed it.